Think about a word you probably hear or maybe even say dozens of times a day. A word that slips out so automatically, it honestly sounds less like language and more like, well, just breathing. Sorry. You say it before asking a simple question, right? Or for taking 10 minutes to text back. Or, let's be real, maybe even when you bump into a totally inanimate object like a chair. But what if I told you that isn't actually politeness? In today's explainer, we're diving into how the reflexive apology is actually an ancient biological survival strategy. So, the big question is, are you polite or are you just surviving? To really wrap our heads around this, let's look at someone from our source material. Picture a 29-year-old guy named David. He's standing in a super busy coffee shop, and the barista hands him his drink, but they get the order slightly wrong. Before David even fully processes what's happening, the word is already out of his mouth. Sorry. He apologizes as if the barista's mistake was somehow his own fault. It's almost as if his simple, quiet existence, just standing there in the coffee shop line, had caused this massive inconvenience. Now, what's truly fascinating here is the duality of that simple little word. You see, for David, this doesn't just happen at the coffee shop. It happens dozens of times every single day. In work meetings, he apologizes for just asking clarifying questions. In friendships, he apologizes for expressing totally basic needs. And in romantic relationships, he apologizes for taking up any emotional space at all. Now, on the surface, to everyone around him, this just looks like extreme humility or kindness, right? But underneath all that, it is something far more complicated and honestly, far more revealing about how a human nervous system actively learns to survive its environment. To truly understand what's driving David's behavior, we have to talk about a specific biological mechanism. When humans face a threat, we're universally taught that the responses are fight or flight. But there's actually a crucial third response. It's called the fawn response. Fawning means appeasing a threat instead of escaping it. It's about becoming smaller, more agreeable, more useful, and basically invisible. The subconscious logic is pretty simple. If you can make yourself completely unthreatening, the danger just might pass you by. So for a child growing up in an unpredictable home, maybe where a parent's mood could shift without a moment's warning, or where love felt strictly conditional on being easy and being no trouble at all, fawning was the ultimate shield. And here is the absolutely crucial distinction. Fawning was never just a quirky character trait or some simple mental habit you consciously choose. It was and is a highly functioning survival algorithm. But here's the major catch. That algorithm doesn't magically disappear when the childhood danger finally leaves. Instead, it embeds itself deeply, and it actually becomes the permanent operating system for literally every relationship that follows in your adult life. Which brings us to a really hidden reality. Chronic apologizing isn't actually about the specific thing you are apologizing for. Not at all. It is entirely about preemptively managing someone else's emotional state before they even have a chance to form a reaction. Basically, your nervous system is constantly scanning the room the exact same way a smoke detector scans for a fire. The very millisecond it senses the faintest possibility of tension, disapproval, or disappointment, boom, it fires off an apology. It works exactly the way a reflex pulls your hand back from a hot stove. It happens way faster than conscious thought and way faster than logic. By the time you're consciously aware you've said sorry, your body had already decided it was literally a matter of survival. In fact, research on the nervous system shows that a fawn response creates this really stark divide between what's happening on the outside and what's going on inside. On the outside, you project this agreeable warmth and a really convincing performance of okayness. But on the inside, there is genuine, blaring internal alarm. You might be experiencing low-grade panic, an elevated heart rate, and shallow breathing. The person smiling and so easily saying sorry is actually physically stressed because somewhere in their past, they learned that visibly showing alarm was far more dangerous than masking it. Think about what this teaches a person over the years. It deeply ingrains the belief that their very presence requires justification, and that safety is earned exclusively through being small. And this exacts a massive, invisible toll across all areas of life. It follows people into job interviews where they instinctively undersell their own hard-earned accomplishments. It bleeds into friendships where they just absorb the blame for things that were never, ever their fault. It haunts romantic relationships where they find themselves apologizing for crying, for wanting a little reassurance, or for simply having a bad day. They build an entire identity around not being a burden. And let me tell you, burnout from constantly managing everyone else's comfort, it doesn't actually look like burnout. To the outside world, it just looks like being an easygoing person. But beneath that easygoing exterior lies a very specific, very heavy kind of loneliness. Because if you operate this way, the version of you that gets loved by others is only the apologetic, agreeable, ultra-low maintenance version. It is never the full, authentic version of you. It's never the person who is exhausted or frustrated or simply wants something without having to earn it first. So even when surrounded by friends or even when in a deeply loving relationship, there remains this quiet ache of never quite being known. You spend so much of your life managing everyone's perception that you kind of lose track of what your true self would even sound like if you just stopped. So, let's bring David back into our story here. David didn't fully understand any of this heavy biological baggage until one very specific conversation with a friend. After hearing David apologize for the third time in a single chat, his friend paused, looked right at him, and asked this simple, piercing question. What exactly are you sorry for, right now? David opened his mouth to answer, and in that exact moment, he realized something profound. He didn't actually know. There had been no offense, there was no mistake made, and absolutely nothing that required forgiveness. It was just that old automatic survival reflex firing in a moment that required absolutely nothing from him at all. That tiny gap of silence, that pause where he found himself entirely unable to justify the apology, well, that was the very first crack in a pattern that had run completely silently in the background of his life for almost 3 decades. So let's look at how this realization builds into actual change. Because here is the hard truth of the matter. You can't out logic and nervous system. You can't just use willpower or simply decide one morning to completely stop apologizing. The reflex is just too deep. Remember, the fawn response lives directly in your physical body. It's in tightened shoulders, in a breath that you hold unconsciously, and a stomach that clenches right before you speak. Healing this actually requires slowly providing your nervous system with new, tangible evidence of safety. Because the fawn response only makes sense in an environment where being yourself feels dangerous, right? So you have to update your body's outdated threat map. The first step is finding just one safe relationship to test a small act of directness. Maybe that's a request without an apology attached or an opinion stated plainly. You just need to survive it to show your body it's safe. Step 2 is deeply physical. Practice slow breathing to consciously release that bodily tension. And finally, use the pause to interrupt the reflex. Pausing before speaking interrupts the automatic response just long enough for a different one to emerge, one rooted in conscious choice rather than ancient fear. Now, it's extremely important we clarify our ultimate goal here. The goal was never to become someone who absolutely never apologizes. Real apologies, when given for genuine mistakes, are literally one of the most vital tools we humans have for repairing connection. Rather, the goal is to reclaim the difference between genuine accountability, which builds strong relationships, and reflexive self-erasure, which is really just fear wearing the mask of politeness. Only genuine accountability allows you to exist fully in a relationship without shrinking or pre-apologizing for the space you simply take up by being alive. Today, David still says sorry sometimes, and honestly, he probably always will. But now, every so often, he catches the reflex right before it leaves his mouth. In that half-second pause, he asks himself that same question his friend once asked. Sometimes the answer is yes, an apology is needed. But often the answer is no. This moment just deserves to exist without one. That small, quiet act of discernment, repeated over and over, is slowly teaching his entire nervous system a new, truer story. A story that his presence was never the problem, it never needed defending, and it simply needs to be allowed to take up the space it was always meant to. If you recognize this pattern in yourself today, please know it isn't a weakness. Not at all. It's a brilliant survival strategy that once kept you safe, and recognizing it means the rewiring has already quietly begun. If this explainer helped you understand your own hidden mechanics, we would absolutely love for you to subscribe to Mind Unseen. Go ahead and smash that like button, and definitely share this with that one friend who always says sorry first. Drop into the comments and let us know, when did you first notice this pattern in yourself? Turn on those notifications so you never miss an explainer. And we will see you next time.